I bow to no man, but I will take a piece of him.
A piece you will have.
So you've convinced another empire, be it through war or diplomacy, to become your vassal. As part of that vassal contract, you probably negotiated some Overlord holdings with your new subject. But then you find that there are a whole host of options for the different Overlord buildings you can put down on your subject's planets. And when we couple that with the fact that Overlord holding slots are quite a rare commodity, you might be faced with quite a bit of decision paralysis. But don't worry, in this video we're going to look at and break down all of the Overlord holdings, which ones are great, which ones are bad, and which ones are just mediocre. We're going to do that by putting them in a tier list, and that should help to cut through any decision paralysis you might have. First, let's quickly look at what the rules surrounding Overlord holdings are. So, at the base level, you get 0, yes that's 0 Overlord holdings that you can put down on your subject. You will need to negotiate from that bottom level of 0 all the way up to the maximum level of 4. For every single holding you have, that will decrease the monthly loyalty of your subject, so there is a cost to having more holdings. This holding limit is empire specific, so each empire will have a specific unique number here, and when you want to build holdings on a specific subject empire, you can only build as many of these holdings as your holding limit, which does mean these building slots are in very short supply. And there's also something else to bear in mind when we're ranking all of these holdings. Every 1.5 loyalty we cause the subject to go down by, that is basically equivalent to about 15% of one resource category if we want to be taking a tribute from our subject. So we do need to balance how well these buildings work in comparison to taking 15% of their monthly minerals, energy credits or food, or something equivalent to that. We're going to start right at the bottom down in the F tier as usual with a tier list. This lowest tier is populated by Overlord holdings that I actually wouldn't recommend you ever build. To have these buildings will cost you more than any potential benefits you could be gaining. First up we have the Noble Chateau. This is a lovely flavorful holding which I think is fantastic from a roleplay perspective. However, outside of that I really can't recommend you use it. It will give you +2 stability on your capital, that is it. In exchange for that, you'll get -15 amenities on the vassal's planet and -1 loyalty, which is basically equivalent to kind of 10% of their monthly resources in one category. Okay, what does 2 stability give us? Well, that gives us just over 1% extra resource output from jobs, which is very little considering how much you're actually paying for it. On top of that, the reduction of amenities to your subject planet will reduce the output of that planet, so if you're taxing your subject, taxes will go down. The experimental crater does have some positive notes. You're going to, as the Overlord, get +8 engineering research base and +4 physics research. It will provide 3 minor jobs to the planet that any of the pops living there, any of your vassal pops, will be using, so if you're taxing them for something like their mineral income, this will benefit you in that way. Additionally, there is a chance to add a buried lithoid blocker, a 20% chance every 2 to 4 years, which means if you ever integrate this subject, you'll be able to clear those blockers and get your hands on some extra pops, but they will cost you minerals. That is all the upsides. The downsides are that planet devastation will go up by +30 every 2 to 4 years, which massively reduces the output of the planet, giving a whopping 30% reduction to pop output, increases the upkeep of that planet. Generally speaking, it will diminish the economy of the vassal. On top of that, it's going to cost you 1 loyalty per month, so this is really bad if you're wanting to tax your vassal in any way, shape or form. The Orbital Assembly Complex is quite a weird holding. Now, in a multiplayer game, if you are able to play it just right with another player who becomes your vassal, this is quite a synergistic building that can have some reasonable upsides. On the other hand, for single player usage, it is pretty garbage. It's going to increase the planetary build speed by 10%, and then it will improve the orbital ring modules. Habitation modules get +0.5 building slots, orbital shipyards get +1 shipyard capacity, and the anchorages give +2 naval cap. On top of that, the planetary defense modules give you +1 defense platform cap. All of that is kind of nice, but given that the AI generally a lot of the time won't even be building orbital rings, you're not really going to find that there is much use for this. You're going to be spending upkeep on it, and it will take up a precious Overlord holding slot. Distributed processing is another fantastically thematic holding. It gives you +4 mind thrall jobs, and it can only be built by a machine intelligence that is not a rogue servitor. The mind thralls though are basically useless. Each of them produces a paltry base of 2 or maybe it's 2.5 research points of each category, and that is pretty much nothing. You do get 4 of them, so you'll get probably somewhere in the region of 10 to 12, maybe even 14 if the planet has lots of bonuses on it, and all of that is in exchange for 2 monthly loyalty, which you can probably trade for something like 30 or maybe even 45% of their research points of the entire Empire instead, which, as you could probably tell, is a lot more. The Off-World Foundry is the Prospectorium specific Overlord holding, and unfortunately it is the worst specialized subject Overlord holding. But what does it actually do? Well, basically it provides 2 metallurgist jobs to any planet you put it on, and those alloys will go directly to you. That is it. So you're going to be getting somewhere in the region of anywhere between 8 and maybe 15 or 16 alloys, and all of that at the cost of 1.5 monthly loyalty, which you could definitely trade in for a larger percentage of their overall alloy production, which I think would be much better. Unless this is the very first thing you put down on a Prospectorium. Let's say you've spun off a single system as a vassal that you want to turn into a Prospectorium, and their one planet has literally 2 pops on it or something like that, and so they are making no resources as an empire. Except for that specific edge case, yeah, it's never really worth it. And if you're enjoying this video, please vassalize that like button. Now we're in the C tier. The uses of the Overlord holdings in this tier have a little bit more of a niche specific appeal, and sometimes the benefits will outweigh the costs, but generally speaking, you probably don't want to build them either. Do continue to bear in mind that these Overlord holding slots are in very short supply, so we must be very Spartan with our choice of Overlord holdings. The Emporium is a very inefficient Overlord holding. It is going to cost you a whopping 5 consumer goods, which doesn't sound like much, but when we see what it actually outputs, you'll see how little you're really getting for that. You're going to get a couple of Overlord traders on the planet. Those traders will be producing some amenities for your subject, which is nice, but they will cost a massive amount of energy credits, and in return produce a few energy credits for you. Now, when we take into account the upkeep of this building, you're really only getting somewhere in the region of 6 to 8 energy credits at base market prices. That means that this is costing a whopping amount of energy for your subject, and whilst yes, it won't impact on their tax, there are much better ways for a subject to get amenity, and it's, in my opinion, a real waste of an Overlord holding. There aren't any massive negatives, it's just a pretty useless building. Service guarantees citizenship, and never is that more true than for the recruitment office. This is going to provide you +10 naval capacity and +2 Overlord recruiter jobs. Those jobs have quite a bit of energy and unity upkeep, they will produce some defensive armies, and on top of that you're going to get your hands on a pop roughly every 25 years. Again, like the previous Overlord holding, the benefits here are very minuscule, and it's really a waste of an Overlord holding slot. The Ranger Lodge requires you to be environmentalist as one of your civics. This holding is going to create a nature preserve blocker, reducing the overall size of one of your subject's planets, and then it also will give you 1 Overlord Ranger job. The Ranger job provides a consumer goods upkeep reduction of 10% to the subject, and provides you, the Overlord, with quite a bit of unity, producing 10 unity base. So it is a relatively nice job here. However, this Ranger Lodge is completely outshone by another holding that we will get to later that provides some slightly better benefits with the same unity output. The Gaia Seeder outpost requires you have the Gaia Seeded Civic, which is quite an entry level requirement already. It does give some quite nice bonuses. It will increase the habitability of the planet you put it on by 20%. It will grant +1 monthly loyalty, which is quite a nice loyalty boost for the subject. And after 10 years, it will terraform the planet into a Gaia world. So if you're planning on integrating this vassal, it's very nice there as well. However, That does come with a hefty energy and exotic gases upkeep, as well as quite a large cost in energy and exotic gases up front. Overall, I'm pretty sure it's actually just cheaper to terraform the planet into a Gaia world yourself. Placing a Dread outpost on a subject's world will turn the defense armies of that planet into undead defense armies. You'll also get a small amount of physics and society research, and you'll get some extra defense armies on the planet, but for the cost here, you might as well go with a slightly different Overlord holding that I will look at in the next tier above, because you'll simply get a bit more science out of that than you will with this one. It is nice from a thematic point of view, but generally not that efficient as a holding. The Reemployment Center provides your subjects with zombie pops, because they've got access to the Overlord Reassigner job, which should allow some biological pop assembly, though of course with the caveat that they will be zombies. Any egalitarian subject will suffer minus 0.5 loyalty, and there is some upkeep. Why is this down here in the C tier? Well, it doesn't benefit you that much as the Overlord to give your subject a very minor increase to pop growth, at the whopping cost of 1 Overlord holding slot. Though that being said, this isn't inherently a bad holding. But what do you think of my tier list so far? Have I placed the Overlord holdings in the right place? Do you agree? Do you completely hate what I've done? Whatever you think, please let me know down in the comments below. The holdings in the B tier generally have very little in the way of requirements. These are holdings you'll get to build quite early on, and at the time they'll be some of the best holdings you'll have available, probably for your 3rd or 4th slot. However, later on I don't think you're going to find that much use for them, because they're going to be massively outshone by the holdings in the S tier, and maybe 1 or 2 of the holdings in the A tier. The communal housing outreach is only available to communist, and by that I mean shared burden civic empires. It provides your subject with plus 10 housing and plus 6 amenities, which on the surface is nice, but really nothing important. What is fantastic about this is that it will give you a plus 100% ethics attraction to egalitarianism. And that means that you're going to boost the alignment of your subject, because you'll be fanatic egalitarian towards your specific ethic type, which over time, as they move and hopefully as they actually embrace your ethic, that will increase the loyalty, and thus you can hit them with a better contract. All of your vassals are equal, but some are more equal than others. When you finally convert the empire into egalitarian, this communal housing outreach also provides a further +1 loyalty, so it is a fantastic loyalty generating tool for communist empires. Similar to the previous holding, the franchise headquarters gives a plus 100% ethics attraction to the Overlord's fanatic ethic. Yes, you do have to be a megacorp and have the franchising civic to get it, and in addition to that you must already have a branch office on this planet. But once you put this down, it should really benefit and help your relationship with the vassal by changing their ethic to match yours. You do get a minus 0.5 loyalty permanently from this building, however, that is somewhat offset economically, because this holding does give you access to the Overlord manager jobs, which will convert some of the clerks' production into unity for you and your empire. Don't forget that the AI does tend to love clerks and employ pops in that job, and most of your branch office buildings provide additional clerk jobs to a planet, so you should be able to get quite a few clerks and therefore produce a tidy sum of unity from this franchise headquarters. The satellite campus is a very easy option to boost your research in a vassal that isn't producing much research itself. This is an option you want to go for when a contract or changing the terms of the agreement to tax their research production wouldn't really make much sense yet. By putting this down, you'll produce research not only for the vassal, but also quite a bit of research at around 30 research when bonuses are factored in, pushing up to 40 to 50 later on in the game when you build this. That does make it better than the previous research options we've looked at. However, there is a better research option yet to come for Overlord holding buildings. The Offspring Nest is a holding unique to Progenitor hive minds. The Offspring drone feeder job it provides boosts worker production by 5% on the planet, as well as giving you a nice tidy 14 extra research as the Overlord for society research. It also makes all of the armies Offspring-led armies, which is nice, but the main benefit here is that juicy 5% extra production. It's not massively overpowered, but it is something that's quite good given it doesn't cost you any loyalty if you want to boost the resource output of the subject empire and thus increase their tax burden. If you're a hive mind with the Tree of Life origin, you can get your hands on the Tree of Life sapling holding. This costs 1,000 food, which shouldn't be too difficult to get together. It will increase the loyalty of the subject by +1, which is quite nice. It also boosts the habitability of the planet by 10%, which is equivalent to a 5% increase in their growth speed and plus 5% resource output from jobs. And as you might know by now, boosting your subject's economy is great because you can tax them for it. The rest of the benefits aren't that amazing. Food will get +1 from agri drones, or just if you've got a regular subject that is the farmer job. You do get +1 Overlord Arborist, which will grant you some additional food at the cost of food upkeep for the vassal. Again, nothing amazing to write home about, but that +1 loyalty and the habitability bonus is really, really good, because that means you can really suck your vassal dry when it comes to tax negotiations. And at this point I want to say a massive thank you to all my patrons and channel members. Your support is really, really appreciated. If you'd also like to support this channel, there is a link to Patreon down below in the description, and you can click the join button just below this video. Welcome to the A tier. In this tier, we have holdings that have massive upsides. The only reason they're not quite in the S tier is there are some slightly better options, I believe, available to us, but overall, these holdings have some great uses, and you probably want to build them on lots of your subject empires. The Overlord Garrison holding is a one-stop shop for all of your loyalty needs. It will provide a base of plus 0.5 loyalty, and if you land 3 offensive armies down on the planet you build this on, an additional 1.5 loyalty for a total of +2 per month. Though it does come with a few downsides. The planet will get minus 15% happiness, so try to avoid putting an Overlord Garrison on a particularly economically important subject world. The Organic Haven is only available to rogue servitor machine empires. It will come with a relatively hefty upkeep of 10 consumer goods for this one holding, but it gives out plus 0.5 loyalty, which is a very nice boost, and 5 Overlord Bio Trophy jobs. These will not only produce a massive amount of unity for you, the Overlord, but they will give a massive stability boost to the planet. Well, why is that? The Bio Trophy job gives massive happiness boost to at least 5 pops for this one Overlord holding, and those 5 pops with a massive happiness boost should lend quite a bit of political weight and thus quite a bit of happiness to the average happiness of the planet, bringing up all of the production of every other pop on the world. Not only that, but I think the roleplay element of putting an Organic Haven as a rogue servitor on one of your vassals is simply hilarious. Talk about next level indoctrination tactics. The Splinter Hive comes with a massive loyalty upkeep of 2 loyalty per month for the subject. It does give you a really good bonus though, which is +1 Overlord Breeder jobs. That will cost a small amount of food and give a blocker on the subject planet, but in exchange you get +2 pop assembly every month on your capital. If you put down just a few of these across a few different subject empires, you can quickly get some crazy levels of pop assembly on your capital, especially if all of your pops have something like the budding trait. The Ministry of Production is one of the first interesting ministry buildings we're going to get to look at. These buildings basically steal production from your subjects. They don't provide any jobs, instead they take some of the production from specific jobs. At the moment they are even more powerful because, as far as I can tell, they actually don't reduce the production of any of your subject workers, which makes them much more powerful because you can both take some resources from those workers and tax them to the hilt at a higher tax rate, or a higher effective tax rate, with more resources coming to you, the Overlord, because they're able to ignore the negatives from this building. The Ministry of Production steals food from farmers, and it also steals consumer good production from artisans or artificers. This one is probably one you're only going to want 1 or 2 of, because just a couple of these on a really big and successful vassal world will completely eliminate your need to make any food or consumer goods locally if you play your cards right. Wow, we're almost at the end of the A tier. We're over 19 minutes through this video, and this is the time, this is the secret call out. If you've made it this far, if you're still interested, if you've enjoyed what I've had to say here, please let me know down in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. The Vigil command is the Bulwark-specific Overlord building. It gives you +1 Beholder jobs. They basically increase the number of defense platform capacity you're going to have across your entire empire as an Overlord. For each tier, you're going to get +1 for tier 1, +2 for tier 2, and at tier 4, +4 defense platforms. There is a maximum of 1 allowed per Overlord, so you can't stack a bunch of these with a bunch of bulwarks to have an insane number of defense platforms, but it is still really, really good. In the S tier, we have Overlord holdings that are either absolutely amazing and you're always going to want to put them down wherever you can, or they are the best in their class. They perform the best function of any Overlord holding for their specific role, and therefore that's why you're going to want to put them down if you want to do that specific thing. And first up here we have the Aid Agency. Not only does the Aid Agency give you a massive Unity output, but you'll also get some loyalty as well. If you don't need to go over plus 0.5 loyalty to balance the books, I would recommend putting an Aid Agency down over an Overlord Garrison or one of the other loyalty generating holdings. The Unity as well is great. This is one of the few ways you can produce lots of Unity on your vassals. As a Death Cult Empire, you get access to not only the Sacrificial Temple, but if you're an Overlord, the Sacrificial Shrine. This one, for the small cost of minus 0.5 loyalty every month, puts 2 Mortal Initiate jobs on the subject Empire. That then means when you come to sacrifice pops, you can sacrifice your subjects' pops rather than your own, and it is a little broken here. If you have less pops in your Empire than your subjects have Mortal Initiates all over the place, you can end up with some crazy bonuses scaled into the plus thousands. So this is a really good holding. But even once they nerf that, which I hope they do, it is of course much better to sacrifice someone else's pops than your own. The Ministry of Extraction is pretty much the same as the Ministry of Production, except this one deals with alloys and minerals, 2 very important resources, which are much more important than food and consumer goods, I would argue. Not only that, if you put one of these down on one of your subjects' Ecumenopolis worlds, you're going to be getting crazy alloy production siphoned away from your subject, and at very little cost to you as the Overlord. They are fantastic holdings. You should put them down wherever you see the opportunity. The Ministry of Energy is slightly weaker than the Ministry of Extraction. It only siphons out energy credits from your subject. However, it is still very powerful and has half of the loyalty cost per month. Getting your hands on this much energy by doing basically nothing except slapping a building down and paying 1 exotic gas is insane. And the great thing about all of these ministries are, the higher the difficulty level, the higher the production bonuses of your AI vassals, and therefore, because they have higher production bonuses, those production bonuses are factored in to the Overlord energy production, meaning you'll be getting crazy amounts of resources. The Ministry of Science is the Scholarium-specific Overlord holding, and it is the best Specialist Vassal Overlord holding we have. You can only put it on the capital of another empire, and you only get 1 of these as an Overlord across all of your various subjects. It will reduce the loyalty of the empire you put it on by 1, but you get plus 3% research speed, which is nice. It's a small nice bonus. That's equivalent to a third of an Ascension perk. But more importantly, on top of that, every researcher on the planet you place this on will generate 2 research points of each category per pop working that job. So if you put this down, it operates in a very similar way to the ministries and gives insane levels of output for research. And that is all the while actually not reducing the research output and research potential, the tax potential of your subject. Finally, we have the Ministry of Truth. This basically allows you to produce extra influence at no additional cost. The reason it's up here in the S tier is, the more vassals you have, the more influence you will need to continually renegotiate those vassal contracts. Being able to put down 1 Ministry of Truth like this on every single vassal you have will boost your overall production of influence and thus speed up the process of getting more and more resources or more and more of the things you need out of your vassals. I'd actually recommend putting down a Ministry of Truth on every vassal you take, as you increase the number of vassals you get. Do note that the tooltip here isn't quite right, it is rounded up. You only get a base output of plus 0.15 influence per propagandist jobs for a total base of plus 0.3, with bonuses that should even out somewhere in the region of half an influence every month, maybe even 0.6 influence if you're lucky, but it won't be the full plus 1. Do keep that in mind. Whilst this video does talk about all of the different Overlord holding types, if you'd like to see the holdings in action, you should check out this video where I attempted to win the game whilst never leaving my home system. Yes, I never expanded beyond one system. Yes, it's a one system challenge. If you want to watch that, check out the video on screen now.